January 2026. The United States captures a sitting president. Not metaphorically, not through sanctions or diplomacy. They physically detain Nicolás Maduro, the president of Venezuela, and remove him from power. At the exact same time, U.S. forces strike Iranian nuclear facilities. Not a surgical strike. A coordinated assault on multiple sites across Iran. And within 48 hours of the Venezuela operation, President Trump announces that the United States will take control of Greenland, whether they like it or not. He refuses to rule out military force. 3 actions, 3 targets. All within weeks of each other in early 2026, Venezuela, Iran, Greenland. And if you think these are random, if you think there's no connection, let me show you something that will change how you see everything happening right now. All 3 countries have one thing in common, and it's not what the government is telling you. Venezuela has the world's largest proven oil reserves, 300 billion barrels, more than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia, more than anyone. Iran controls massive oil reserves in the Persian Gulf, and they've been selling it to China and Russia in currencies that aren't the US dollar, bypassing the entire American financial system. Greenland sits on rare earth elements, the 17 minerals that power every smartphone, every electric vehicle, every advanced missile system, every piece of technology that defines modern civilization. China controls 60 to 80% of the global supply. Greenland could break that monopoly. Oil, rare earths. This isn't about democracy. This isn't about nuclear weapons. This isn't about terrorism or human rights. This isn't about any of the things you're hearing on the news. This is about resources, and this is about who controls them. Let me prove it to you, starting with Venezuela. When the U.S. backed the attempt to remove Maduro, the official story was democracy and human suffering. But behind closed doors, the Trump administration was courting oil executives, promising them total safety for investing tens of billions in Venezuela's oil sector. And after they captured Maduro in January 2026, President Trump stated at a press conference that the U.S. would run the country and that major American oil firms would move in to rebuild Venezuela's oil industry. Secretary of State Marco Rubio made it even clearer. What we're not going to allow is for the oil industry in Venezuela to be controlled by adversaries of the United States. Not Venezuelan companies, American companies. Here's what nobody tells you about Venezuelan oil. A tanker from Venezuela reaches Texas refineries in 4 days. From the Middle East, 43 days. That's a 10-to-1 advantage in logistics alone, and with 300 billion barrels sitting there, Venezuela is the single most valuable oil prize on the planet. But there's a problem. Venezuela's government keeps the oil industry in public hands. Under Hugo Chavez and then Maduro, the state oil company was required to hold majority stake in any joint venture. Foreign companies could only play a minority role. From Wall Street's perspective, this is unacceptable. You can't maximize profit when the government owns 51%. You need full access. You need privatization. So when the U.S. backed Juan Guaido as the alternative president, his representatives openly signaled that a new regime would allow foreign private oil companies a far greater stake. Translation: hand the keys to Exxon and Chevron. And the moment the U.S. threw support behind Guaido, they froze Venezuelan assets abroad. Billions in oil revenues, gold held in foreign banks, all locked up or redirected to the U.S.-aligned alternative government. This isn't new. This is a pattern that's played out for 70 years. In 1953, the CIA helped overthrow Iran's Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh. His crime? Nationalizing Iran's oil, taking profits away from British and American companies and using them for Iran's development. Unacceptable. So they removed him and installed the Shah, who played ball with Western oil interests for 25 years. The U.S. invades Iraq under the pretense of weapons of mass destruction. No WMDs were ever found. But Iraq has the 5th largest oil reserves in the world. And Saddam Hussein had been threatening to sell oil in euros instead of dollars. Libya, 2011. Muammar Gaddafi is overthrown and killed. He'd been pushing for an African currency backed by gold to replace the dollar in oil trade. Within months, he's dead and Libya's oil fields are open for business. The pattern is mathematical. When a resource-rich nation asserts control over its own wealth in ways that redirect revenue toward public services instead of foreign investors' pockets, it crosses a line. Venezuela crossed that line. And in January 2026, they paid for it. Now let's talk about Iran. The official story is nuclear weapons and terrorism. But Iran has been a target since 1979, not because of nukes, because of what happened that year. The Iranian Revolution overthrew the US-backed Shah and took control of Iran's massive oil reserves away from Western companies. For 45 years, every US administration has tried to punish Iran for that act of independence. Iran under the Shah was compliant. Post-1979, Iran became a rogue state that dared to defy US influence in the Persian Gulf. And here's what makes Iran even more dangerous from Washington's perspective. They forged closer ties with China and Russia. They're selling oil in non-dollar currencies. They're helping China and Russia build an alternative to the US-led financial system. The strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities in 2026 weren't about preventing a bomb. They were about punishing a regional power that refuses to submit. They were about sending a message: defy US dictates in an oil-rich region, and this is what happens. And then there's Greenland. In 2019, Trump floated the idea of buying Greenland. People laughed. It sounded absurd. A frozen island with 56,000 people. Why would anyone care? By 2025, Trump was no longer joking. He insisted the US would do something on Greenland, whether they like it or not. He refused to rule out military force. Why? Because Greenland sits on rare earth elements. These 17 minerals are the secret sauce of modern technology, and China controls 60 to 80% of global supply. That's a chokehold on the entire Western tech and defense industry. If China cuts off supply, the US military grinds to a halt. Greenland could break that monopoly. Trump made this explicit. Controlling Greenland would secure rare minerals for electric vehicles, wind turbines, advanced electronics, and military hardware. This wasn't about real estate. This was about locking down future supply lines and denying them to America's competitors. And the timing tells you everything. Trump's push on Greenland came right after capturing Maduro, first an oil-rich state in Latin America, then a mineral-rich Arctic territory. This is a pattern, and this pattern has happened before in history. When great powers feel their dominance threatened, they become more aggressive. They try to grab strategic assets to prolong their supremacy. Historian Alfred McCoy calls this late-stage empire syndrome. The empire in decline becomes militant, irrational, grasping, and we've seen it before. Britain and France, former superpowers, launched the Suez Canal invasion when Egypt's leader nationalized that crucial trade route. It was a last-ditch effort to maintain imperial control over Middle Eastern oil routes. It failed spectacularly. The US and USSR forced them to back down, and it marked the end of Britain's role as a global policeman. The empire that once ruled a quarter of the earth collapsed, trying to hold one canal. The Soviet Union, facing economic stagnation and Western pressure, invaded Afghanistan. Soviet leaders wanted to secure influence in Central Asia. It drained their economy and morale. Within a decade, the Soviet Union collapsed. The Afghanistan invasion didn't save the empire. It hastened its death. The pattern is clear. When empires start aggressively grabbing resources in their final stages, it's not a sign of strength. It's a sign of desperation. And there's an even older parallel. The late 1800s, the scramble for Africa. European powers and the United States rushed to grab any unclaimed territory before their rivals could. The United States joined this era with the Spanish-American War in 1898. Under the cover of liberating Cuba, the U.S. annexed Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. Strategic naval bases, economic footholds. Sound familiar? And here's what's terrifying about the historical pattern. When empires engage in these late-stage resource grabs, it often triggers large-scale conflict. The scramble for colonies fueled rivalries that ignited World War I. The aggressive expansions by Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan led to World War II. Japan invaded Southeast Asia to grab oil fields and rubber. Germany annexed neighbors for resources and territory. Today's context is different, but the risk is real. The US confronting Iran, seizing Venezuela, threatening Greenland. Russia and China have stakes in all three. After the US took Maduro in January 2026, China, Russia, and Iran jointly condemned it as armed aggression. That kind of unity among rival powers is how coalitions form to check ambitious empires. It's how world wars start. The average person isn't being told this. They're being sold narratives about good versus evil, democracy versus authoritarianism. But behind closed doors, the conversation is about oil fields, mineral deposits, supply chains, and who controls the choke points of global power. This is the hidden agenda. Venezuela's oil, Iran's oil, Greenland's rare earths. It's all connected. It's all part of the same strategy. And it's happening right now. Subscribe, because the next video breaks down exactly which countries are next on the target list, which companies are positioned to profit, and what the historical pattern says happens when empires refuse to accept decline. The pattern doesn't care if you believe in it. It doesn't need your faith. It just repeats, like clockwork, like mathematics, like every empire before us. Thanks for watching. And remember, in geopolitics, as in magic shows, the real action is in what the handout of view is doing.